This is an event on behalf of our Senator, Maryland Senator, Jamie Raskin. I would like to thank especially my host committee, Morad, Charleen and Morad Ghorban, and my co-host committee, Hamzeh and Emmalee, Saadat and Rasmussen, Saumaun Heait, Frank Islam, and Yousef, Saghi and Yousef Javadi are not here tonight. So, also, I would like to thank our special guest here, Mr. Ghorban, who is Deputy Assistant Secretary of the State in the House Affairs in the State Department. Joel has a lot of experience in the nuclear deals and with the Middle East and basically. So, we are here tonight to support Jamie as a Democratic nominee from Maryland 8th Congressional District, who is running for a seat in the House of Representatives, which is vacated by incumbent Mr. Van Hollen, who is running for a Senate seat. We are supporting Jamie because he is a tremendous leader. Jamie's track record as a state legislature in Maryland is amazing. He has affected changes in public policy in Maryland. Plus the fact that he's a constitutional law scholar. He has written many books in constitutional law and has published many papers, including U.S. Supreme Court versus American People in 2003, and changes in Maryland public policy, conflict resolution. Also, he has taught at Harvard University, and he's now a professor of constitutional law at American University. He is an avid supporter of civil rights. He has made changes in our immigration policy, and he's reformed our immigration policy in Maryland. Plus the fact that he has been an avid supporter of a nuclear anti-proliferation nuclear deal with Iran. So we thank you for that. So we are here, my friends, whether you are Democrats or Republicans, and I know some of you may be Republicans. We have the same agenda and the same objectives. We all need a better future for ourselves and for our children. We need a safe environment to live in. We need to restore our old infrastructure. We need better education for our children. We need economic, racial, and gender equality. And we need an effective government to foster all of these results for us. And yes, we do need more government to regulate our water, clean water, and clean air. We do need government to legislate gun laws, to take the guns away from homeborn criminals and also we need to have a better relationship of community and the police. So, and no, we don't need government in our bedrooms. And no, we don't need government to build walls or to go to homes and take people out and deport immigrants. I think we probably agree with that. So we need Jamie in the House. In the House of Representatives, that majority of the members are supporting supported by special interests. Special interest group agendas are unfortunately not necessarily aligned with our interests and well-being. People who have been threatened by others who are more intelligent than them or who have more passion to support middle-class causes. They are not ashamed of prosecuting these people for not only 1 or 2 years, but for 25 years, and not only for on 1 or 2 matters, but for 10 trivial issues. And at the end, when they don't find criminality, they are not ashamed to say, oh, the system is rigged. Yes, the system that's supporting you guys is rigged, and that's why you're in power. Sorry, that's my opinion. And now to put it on a more positive slant, we need to continue our democratic agenda. We have benefited from, after 8 years having the worst recession in the history of US, that goes back to 60 years before, as far as we remember. We have overcome that. We have recovered that. We have also avoided many wars by assertive diplomacy and by intelligence. And we have opened the door to Cuba. We have a normalized relationship with Cuba. We have passed the most extensive anti-proliferation deal that has ever made in the history of US with any countries, and that was with Iran. And yes, we have a healthcare. I know that our healthcare is not perfect, especially for some of my friends, doctor friends who are here. They would feel very bad about this healthcare program. But don't lose the sight of many, many millions of people who were not uncovered before are now covered. And of course, this is a work in progress. Like any other objective or progressive agendas we have, we are moving on nuances of improvement, and we will improve upon it. So, having said that, I need to say that the world is not perfect, obviously. We are dealing with terrorism. Why? Because of the mistakes, as you all know, because of the mistakes we made invading Iraq, on the false premises and false pretenses and fabricated facts that we invaded Iraq, and the consequences of which was creation of ISIS. And ISIS atrocities are haunting us every day. Yes, we know that. But for US to remain a leader in the world today, guys, we need a true leadership. This is a very important time in history for us. US needs to be engaged with the rest of the world in a constructive manner. So we need leaders with foresight and experience. And we should be very wary of, really avoid those leaders who will give you false promises and slogans. We make America great again. With no specific plan and no real concrete idea commensurate with the complexities of the world we live in today. So let's be patient and be deliberate for who we are nominating as our leaders. With that said, I know Jamie Raskin will steer this country in the right direction. And I would like to ask you all to extend your warmest welcome to our new representative from Maryland, Jamie Raskin.
Houri for Congress. Houri and Serge, thank you so much for opening your humble abode to my campaign. This is really something. If I had known You know, I was here once before for the debate, and I know some of you guys came to this debate. I think I was so nervous about the debate, I didn't fully appreciate where I was. Now I wish I had brought my suitcase and my sleeping bag. Next time I'm going to spend the whole weekend. So, but it's a delight to be back with a lot of friends here and to meet lots of new people. Look, this is a really uplifting and inspiring event we're doing. After a week of the Republican National Convention in Donald Trump on TV, this is a very moving thing that you put together. It really is. It's an important thing that you've put together. I was thinking, we had a little conversation in the other room, and I was thinking about the William Butler Yeats poem, The Second Coming, where he says, "Things fall apart, the center will not hold. The best lack all conviction, and the worst are filled with passionate intensity." Just like Donald Trump, the worst are filled with passionate intensity. Houri, you've shown us how the best can stand on conviction. We don't have to lack conviction. And the best can be filled with passionate intensity too, as the world seems to be fraying at the edges in so many different ways. So, let me just say, because I don't know everybody, I'm going to say a few words about my political career, which you gestured at, so I can tell you a little bit about what I've been doing, and then we can talk about the world situation, if that makes sense. Yeah. We'll open it up. But I basically, my whole life has led me to this moment, to be the Democratic nominee for Congress from the 8th Congressional District. I was born here. I grew up here. My whole family is here. When I was a kid, my dad used to say to us that in life, everybody has two impulses. And one is to stand like a tree, and the other is to fly like a bird. And I've always been a tree person. I went away to college and law school. I came back. I've lived abroad a couple of times, but basically, my whole life has been right here in Maryland or in Washington. And I love it here, and I hope I will spend the rest of my life here because I'm deeply committed to this extraordinary community we have where people are educated, people are publicly spirited and engaged with public life, and people are enlightened and liberal in the traditional sense of being open to the world, open to new experience, open to different cultures and different peoples and communities. So I love it here. And I've been a professor of constitutional law for 26 years now at American University. You're supposed to say, that's funny, you don't seem that old. But nobody says that anymore. But anyway, I've been a professor of constitutional law. I did write that book about Bush versus Gore and right-wing judicial activism in America called The Supreme Court versus the American People. I've written a lot about election law and a book about the Voting Rights Act, and I wrote a book for high school students called We the Students, which is about all the Supreme Court cases that affect kids in high school, like locker searches and drug testing and censorship of newspapers and yearbooks. I'll get a copy to our two young men here tonight, Aiden and, where's Aiden's brother? They're over there. Well, I owe you guys a book. They invented a game. I'm going to check it out in the other room. But I decided to run for office 10 years ago. And I'd never run before. I decided to run for the state senate. George W. Bush was president, you'll recall. It was a bleak time for those of us who are true blue Democrats. We had two wars going on. We had the Iraq War, we had the Afghan War, we had, I don't need to tell you what it was like in Iraq with the destruction and the chaos unleashed in that country, and thousands of young Americans coming back, dead or wounded from those wars. Our economy was spiraling downwards, as Houri was saying, and one day I looked in the newspaper and I saw that my state senator had introduced a bill to expand the death penalty in Maryland. And I did more research. I found that my state senator had been blocking marriage equality. And my state senator was not standing up for the values that I thought the people of Montgomery County believe in, and certainly not where I live in Silver Spring, in Tacoma Park. And so I said I'm going to run for the state senate. And everybody told me two things. They said, one, it's crazy. You can't beat a 32-year incumbent who's the president pro tem of the Maryland Senate and the boss of our local political machine. And two, if by some miracle you were to win, you could never get done all the crazy stuff you're talking about doing, like abolishing the death penalty and restoring voting rights for the ex-felons and banning military-style assault weapons and passing marriage equality. None of it can ever happen. And I said, okay, I'm definitely going to run in that case. And when I first announced, the Washington Post had an article in which they quoted a pundit who said, Raskin's chances of victory are considered impossible. And 9 months later, we got 67% of the vote, and they had another article quoting a pundit who said Raskin's victory was inevitable. So I went from impossible to inevitable in a 9-month period, because the pundits are never wrong, you see. But in truth, I'd like to say it was never impossible, it was never inevitable, it was only possible through the democratic arts of educating, organizing, and mobilizing people for change. And that was the philosophy that I took with me to Annapolis. And you know, when I made my announcement, I laid out everything that I wanted to do. There was no use hiding it. I'm a law professor, and I wrote all this stuff down in articles and books, and so it was a matter of public record. So I laid it all out, what I wanted to do. And I'll never forget, a woman came up to me after my speech, said, Jamie, great speech, I love your speech and everything, but one thing, take out all that stuff you've got in there about letting gay people get married. Because it's never going to happen. Even gay candidates don't talk about it. And it makes you sound like you're really extreme. Like you're not in the political center. And I swallowed hard because I didn't have that many attendees with us that day at my kickoff. I didn't want to offend her, but I said, you know, now that you put it like that, what I recognize is that it is not my ambition to be in the political center, which moves around all the time. It's my ambition to be in the moral center, to try to find what's right the best that we can and bring the political center to us. And that's the public philosophy that I and I am proud to say that every single thing that I first ran on, we have gotten done in the state of Maryland. We abolished the death penalty after 4 centuries in Maryland, a punishment that was used originally against slaves, runaway slaves, and indentured servants for conspiring to kill their masters, against witches who were crushed to death or hanged on the Eastern Shore, against innocent people like Kirk Bloodsworth, who was the first death row exoneree on earth, and he was on death row in the state of Maryland, and it was only because his lawyer took $5,000 out of his own pocket to pay for a DNA test, and that's the chief judge of the D.C. Superior Court now, Judge Morad, to get a DNA test to prove that he had not been guilty of a brutal, grisly, gruesome rape, murder of a 9-year-old girl. Otherwise, he would have gone to his death and we all would have been complicit in the execution of an innocent man. So we got rid of the death penalty. And we passed marriage equality in the state. We were the first state ever to define marriage as only between a man and a woman. We became the first state in the union to pass marriage equality without being told we had to do so by our state Supreme Court. And when it was petitioned to the ballot, we became the first state in the union to uphold marriage equality at the polls by a vote of the people, because we went out and organized everybody to do that. That's an extraordinary thing. I was down there when the Obergefell decision was handed down by the Supreme Court, and they read their opinion. Historic, breakthrough thing. And Mr. Obergefell was in the courtroom, and he walked outside. He was mobbed by the reporters. They said, how do you feel? He said, I feel great. I feel elated, but I want to thank the people of Maryland. Had they not done what they did, my partner and I would have not been able to fly to BWR Thurgood Marshall Airport to be married on the tarmac, only to go back to Ohio to have our marriage nullified by our state government, which is what led to the case. And so we played an important role there. We restored voting rights for ex-felons. I'll tell you the story. This was the very first time I got to speak on the Senate floor. And I campaigned on this issue because, you know, we had Alabama's law. We had Mississippi's law. You got out of prison, you had every other right restored to you except the right to vote. Proving it had nothing to do with rehabilitation or deterrence. It's about voter suppression. You know what it's really about. So I campaigned on that, and I went in when I got elected to see a state senator named Gwendolyn Britt, who was from Prince George's County. She was a great figure. As an undergraduate at Howard University, she had led the campaign to desegregate the Glen Echo amusement park. And I said, Gwen, I campaigned on this issue. I would love to help you on it. And she said, good, I'll let you know. And she came back to me, and it was just 3 or 4 weeks into my very first session. I'd never spoken before on the Senate floor. I was very nervous. It's like speaking in class for the first time. been accomplished. You know? And so she said, Jamie, we got the ex-felon voting bill out of committee, and we want you to be the floor leader on it. And I said, oh my God, I'm so honored and delighted. She said, don't be that honored. You're the only white senator willing to do it. Like, I said, well, all right, I'll take it however I can get it. So the Republican minority leader gets up and says the Democrats want to give voting rights back to murderers, rapists, armed robbers, arsonists. And Gwen, who sat in front of me, turned around and said, it's your turn. You can get up now. But I had an argument for them, and I said, you know, the vast majority of people are going to be re-enfranchised under our legislation, unlike the people you're talking about who are never getting out of prison, are in for nonviolent offenses. I say, take one of my constituents, for example, Jack Abramoff. Okay, now, Jack lives in the beautiful Burke Mill section of District 20. Has gone off to federal prison for 6 years for offenses against the integrity of our democracy. If anybody should be disenfranchised for life, it's somebody engaged in political corruption. But on our side of the aisle, we do believe that the purpose of punishment is rehabilitation of the offender, and we will stand up for the voting rights of even a hardened ex-felon like Jack Abramoff. So then everybody wanted to speak for the Jack Abramoff Voting Rights Act. And we passed it by 2 votes, and we re-enfranchised 88,000 Marylanders. I guess what I'm trying to say is I've seen democracy work. I have seen democratic government work. You know, after the catastrophe that took place in Newtown, Connecticut, we passed the toughest gun safety law in America. I've been introducing for several years a proposal to ban military-style assault weapons. We finally got it done with the leadership of my friend Brian Fosh, our great Attorney General. And we passed fingerprint licensing, universal background check, ban on high-capacity magazines. We passed the best gun safety law in the country. So I've seen it work. But when Chris Van Hollen called me up and said, Senator Mikulski's stepping down, and I'm going to run for the Senate, will you support me? I said, not only will I support you, I'll run for your seats. I knew immediately I wanted to do it. And why? You know, it's funny because I was very excited, and all of my colleagues in the state Senate, all of my colleagues at American University, my wife, my kids, everybody said, you're crazy. Why would you go from being the majority whip in the Maryland Senate, chairing all of these committees, getting all this legislation done, why would you go from that down to the U.S. House of Representatives, where it's just bad vibes and paralysis and fighting with the Tea Party all day? It's a pretty good question, right? And my first answer was very introspective. I said, hey, I'm a middle child. I like to bring people together. I believe in compromise. I believe in conciliation. And you know, nobody's buying it. So now I've got a much more defiant response when people ask me, why would you leave Annapolis where you get stuff done and you balance budgets and everything to go down to Washington? And I say, look, the premise of your question is that people of goodwill have got to give up on Congress. But we can't give up on Congress. That's our Congress down there, even with the gerrymandering and Citizens United and the corporate lobbyists and everything out of control. That's our Congress. We've got to make it work. We can't give up on Congress. That's giving up on America. I won't do it. I won't. The issues are too big now. And it's all the issues that were not mentioned over the last 4 days on TV. It's gun violence, out of control. Tens of thousands of Americans dying every year. And not just from the spectacular episodes like we just saw in Florida or San Bernardino County or Virginia Tech, but also every single day, handgun violence in the cities, people dying. And it's climate change, which it did not, the phrase did not occur at the Republican National Convention. That's a shocking thing. That's a shocking dereliction of public responsibilities. The single greatest threat facing all of humanity is climate change, and they don't mention it. They simply don't talk about it. And if you ask them about it, they say, I don't know, I'm not a scientist. As if that weren't perfectly obvious to everybody in the viewing audience. But look, if you're not a scientist, your job is to listen to the scientists, right? I liken it to going to the doctor. And here I speak as a cancer survivor. You go to the doctor because you're not feeling well. And the doctor says, this is serious. You've got a diagnosis. You need radiation, you need chemo, you need surgery. You go home and your wife says, so, are you sick? You say, I don't know, I'm not a doctor. And you just leave it at that. We've already heard from the scientists what we need to do, right? President Obama went to the North Pole before the Paris conference to mobilize our country and the world. He said, look, what's happening here, the glaciers are shrinking, the ice is disappearing, the walruses are vanishing, the polar bears are drowning, they've got mosquitoes and dragonflies in the North Pole. It's 80 degrees in the North Pole this summer. That's happening. And he says, we've got to get serious, we've got to get focused on this, we've got to break from the carbon economy. And he's followed up there by a bunch of oil companies who say, Mr. President, you're right, the ice is disappearing. We can drill directly down in the water to get the oil that we need. And this is their solution to our energy problems. So the stakes are really big. Our infrastructure in America is crumbling. The roads, the highways, the bridges, the water systems like in Flint, Michigan, the ports, cybersecurity. We need a massive investment in American infrastructure in an environmentally sustainable way. I'm calling for a Green Deal for America. Like a New Deal, but in an environmental way to upgrade the country. And as Houri said, we don't hear anything positive from the other side about what we actually would do. It's just fear. One of our great Democratic presidents, Franklin Roosevelt, said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And Donald Trump says, we have nothing but fear. Just cut the sentence in half. Nothing but fear, that's it. Now, just be afraid, and there's one person who can solve all your problems, and that's me. Donald Trump. I can do it all. That's scary. I mean, we're no longer, I think, my friends, in the realm of politics. We're in the realm of psychology. We're dealing with someone who is an obsessive narcissist who lacks all empathy and emotional affect, all respect for the truth, and is a compulsive liar, which I believe is the classic definition of a sociopath. And I think that we are on the verge of having a presidential election between perhaps the most qualified presidential candidate in the history of the United States, Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, former United States Senator, former First Lady, former General Counsel of the Children's Defense Fund, a truly qualified public servant with whatever foibles she's got, against a sociopath. Like, this is what it has come to. Our first woman president versus a misogynist. And this is basically, this is where we are. So the stakes are huge. I'm excited about this campaign. I'm running now with Hillary Clinton as soon as she's nominated, with Chris Van Hollen for the Senate, and I'm running for Congress here in Heait, and I'm running with the other Democrats. We're raising money, and the money that you so generously contributed tonight goes to our joint federal campaign. I'm putting it in so we can get all of the Democrats elected, because we need to move on these issues. And by the way, it doesn't give me any joy to say that the other political party has been resigning public responsibility. It doesn't. We need a healthy two-party system, or a three-party system, or a four-party system. Competition is great in sports, and great in economics, and it's great in politics. But there's no competition anymore, because what they're offering us is just dangerous across the board. But in the spirit of bipartisanship, I will quote our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who spoke of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And where can we rest our faith other than in the people ourselves? And we have to believe, as we were saying, that we can have an intelligent conversation, that we can talk in a substantive way about the issues and not appeal to people just through demagoguery and propaganda, that we can have a real discussion. And I'm thrilled to be part of the discussion in this room. So I'm very excited to have you guys join my team. We have bumper stickers for everybody. We've got signs if you want a sign. Whatever you do, sign your name on our list with your email and your cell phone, and I make you this promise, you will never be lonely again.
We will take questions from the floor. We can have 3 questions and then we go to dinner, because I think all of you are hungry. Please.
Can I bring it down to a very you are an American Canadian that is problem with the visa issue.
Yes.
So as you probably know, the European Union recently decided not to reciprocate, but to what's happening in the South. You're going to ask get a visa to come back to the US.
Yes.
Non-US citizen. So is there any movement to go forward to support in that area? Because it's a big concern I know about that.
Yes, I will do absolutely everything in my power to restore a situation where people can't get visas to come into the country. This policy of kind of arbitrarily targeting certain countries like Iran and then saying we're going to shut off immigration or restrict visas or the ability of people's relatives to come visit or whatever is so counterproductive to what we're trying to do. I mean, and it's totally antithetical to the way America was founded. We were founded as a country, Tom Paine called it a haven of refuge for people fleeing political and religious persecution from all over the world. And the vision was of a society that would thrive through social integration and intercourse with countries from all over the world. I mean, that's the greatness of America. So I would absolutely get into the weeds and fight on every single one of those bills to try to open up and restore access for student visas, for tourist visas, for family members to come over for the whole thing. I believe really strongly in that.
Maybe in the spirit of reconciliation and conciliation, how are you going to reach across the aisle with the Republicans? What are some of the common points you're going to find with it?
Thank you for that excellent question. And in Annapolis, I prided myself on. We went back and counted during my campaign because I had some very worthy opponents like this guy here. So I had to document some of this stuff. The General Assembly passed 122 of the bills that I introduced, and 95% had Republican support. And a lot of them I introduced with Republicans. Now, some of the areas where we built important policy bridges were criminal justice reform, where a lot of Republicans see that we're spending huge amounts of money locking people up and incarcerating people, and a lot of them for nonviolent offenses. So decriminalization of marijuana, we did with Republicans. Reforming mandatory minimum sentences in drug cases, we did that with Republicans. A bunch of the criminal justice reforms we had Republicans join. Now, also, I like to think of myself as a budget transparency hawk and a budget conservative, and I did a lot of that with Republicans, and oftentimes I was against the Democrats on that, but I introduced legislation with a very conservative Republican named Alex Mooney. He's so conservative, in fact, he left Maryland, he decamped from Maryland, moved to West Virginia, and got himself elected to Congress from West Virginia. So I'm going to serve with him both in the Maryland Senate and in the Congress, and he's from West Virginia. But we put in a bill together to say that all state government expenditures over $5,000 have to be put online within 48 hours in the state. And the Democrat, and I was just with the Republicans on it, and the Democrats were saying to me, well, that's a terrible idea. And I said, why? And they said, there could be something embarrassing in there. I said, that's the whole point. It's embarrassing. You shouldn't be spending it, So, it's not like the Democratic Party is perfect or anything. So I've been able to learn from Republicans, and I think I've been able to teach them on some stuff too. I think on election reform issues and campaign finance, we can also find some common ground. So I don't know in Washington, and know in Annapolis, I was able to make a lot of friends, and the friendship was the basis for bipartisanship. And I hope it's going to be the same thing in Washington, but I don't know. You hear different kinds of stories. But I can assure you this, I will work very hard at it. It means a lot to me.
How about the tax policies?
So the question was about tax policies. Well, number one, transparency in tax policies, so we can have it. Number two, getting rid of a lot of special interest legislation that sneaks its way in. One of the things I talked about a lot in the campaign was the idea that the government, it's not exactly tax policy, but it's an example of a special interest loophole. The government cannot negotiate for lower Medicare drug prices with prescription drug companies. And that costs us like $30 or $40 billion a year. And there's all kinds of little things like that that are snuck into the tax code, and I would want to reform those as much as possible and relieve the tax burden on the middle class as much as we can. I mean, that's basically the policy, the tax policy I pursued in Maryland. I did co-sponsor the increase in the gasoline tax in Maryland so we could invest in the road infrastructure, in the highways and in transit. So I believe in taxes for smart investments that are going to come back to help us in the long run. It's like investing in your house, you know? And I believe the infrastructure is like that. So I don't know if there's other specific tax questions that you've got.
So they're talking about, you know, reducing the capital gains tax. And also they're having it, fixed income tax.
A flat tax.
Flat tax.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is that, you know, I've not been on a tax committee and I haven't studied all of, you know, I don't know all the proposals that are out there, but I'd be willing to check all of them out. You know. Absolutely. So last question.
What is the story of these Western Marylanders that they want to separate? You know, separatists?
Yes. I've heard that was true, that the Western Marylanders were talking about seceding. It's funny, I spent 2 days in Frederick County. You know, our district is not just Montgomery, it's most of Montgomery. It doesn't include some parts of Potomac and Half River Road, and it doesn't include Gaithersburg. But then it kind of snakes up through Rockville and gets up to Frederick County and Carroll County, where I was speaking actually at a meeting earlier this week because there was a Ku Klux Klan rally there. And so I've got basically, I think, the most liberal county in Maryland, Montgomery County, and then Carroll County. That is Trump land there. A lot of it is Trump land and beyond. You don't have to go that much further beyond Trump to get there, but so we have a gerrymandered situation. I mean, I think that the people in Western Maryland, you know, there's a lot of economic problems, you know, in the countryside, and I think that Trump has attempted to appeal to economically anxious and insecure white Americans. And for him, he points the finger at immigrants, it's Muslims, it's Mexicans, it's outsiders who are doing this to you. And you know, in the Democratic primaries, it was Bernie Sanders who was offering a counter to that kind of authoritarian populism, a vision of progressive populism, saying, no, the problem is that the government has not been serving working people. He had a very strong critique of the trade agreements. And then Trump tried to pick up on that the other night. So there are clearly a lot of people who have felt left out in the course of the recovery that we've experienced. And we've got to be speaking to middle American people who live in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Indiana and Michigan about the economic situation and what we're going to do